Hello, hello, for the final song I'm doing in this first batch of video Song of the Day posts is perhaps my favorite song of last year, or at the very least, my favorite song on my favorite album of last year, which is the title track of Mount Eerie's Now Only, an extremely sad album that is largely about the passing of his wife and just what his life is like in the aftermath of that. As I said, I really, really enjoy this song. I find it incredibly moving and beautiful and just rich with someone's experience after going through one of the most devastating things I think anyone could ever go through. Being so deeply in love with someone, having a child with them, having an entire life together, and then having all of that abruptly removed from you. And this is the song where I think he presents kind of the overall thesis of the album and really kind of marks what has changed between this album and his previous album, which is largely about the same things. A Crow Looked at Me. So I don't know, I really want to break down what's going on here lyrically, sonically, musically. So we're going to kind of take it from the top. The song enters like very kind of unassumedly, very understated. It actually does kind of feel like the sense you get walking into a hospital waiting room, um, where suddenly it feels like a collective energy of just somberness, quietness, of like dozens of personal tragedies all sort of unfolding in the same space engulfs you. Oh, and the attitude he shows here uh, in this first verse, I think, is a really nice reflection on that sort of space and his honesty in saying, "I remember still feeling like no one else can understand my devastation is unique." Knowing rationally that that's not true, but still feeling like that's the case, still really almost wanting to believe that that's the case. Um, Phil was talking a lot about Nosgard, Karlov Nosgard, and Sun Kill Moon as influences on him when he was writing this album. And both of them have this same sort of confessional style where they talk about thought patterns they have that they know rationally aren't right, kind of small things, petty things, selfish things, egoistic things. And they do so in a way that isn't meant to kind of glorify this thinking, but isn't really set out to refute it either. Like it's not supposed to be like self-help or anything. It's just an acknowledgement in the universality of this sort of weakness that we have, in this inherent self-interest that we can never really escape. So already, I think this sets the tone of the song like really beautifully. That it's going to be intimate. It's going to be no holds barred. Um, which is like a wrestling term. I never thought about what that meant before. No holds barred. I think it means that every hold is allowed, right? And that's what's going on here. He really is trying to hit you from every angle possible, so that you can understand every angle that was coming out of him during this time. So we go from this little intro. Let's find out what being mortal is. Ah, hmm. That sounds quite interesting. To improve the human experience of death. Okay. And then it goes into this like really jaunty, upbeat, kind of like folk poppy chorus. But people get cancer and die. People get hit by trucks and die. Um, and it's this reminds me a lot of Sun Kill Moon. Sun Kill Moon will have kind of these almost ironic little tangents in a lot of his songs. I think really to underscore the contrasts and to kind of like bring you back in the mode when you get to the original one. But Phil here, I think, takes the idea even further. Um, so we have this chorus, and then it goes into this what Genius calls the post chorus, um, where it starts getting a little more real. That here, this feels almost callous. to refer to his wife's long sickness and horrible death from cancer as people get cancer and die. Um, People get hit by trucks and die, like kind of conflating these two things, which of course are both like kind of random things, and yet this one is long and painful, and this one we think of as like instant, and you just get isekai'd off somewhere. um, but it's like it kind of starts with this um, dismissive irreverence, and then as like the lines extend, the rest of us watching from the side, and some people have to survive and find a way to feel lucky to still be alive. It gets like more and more real, and it goes from this sort of superficial, here's the facts of the situation, to this really lived experience. This is what you have to do in the aftermath of that. And at the end, there's this really devastating like boom on the piano that sounds like someone dropped a bowling ball on the lower half of the piano, and it really resonates with me because I can remember many moments through my life where I received very bad news, or I read about something really terrible on the internet, or I just came to some revelation that felt very devastating and unfortunate, and I could feel that same kind of chord resonating with me, that like really kind of and from there what emerges is this extremely tender image, along with like really delicate now upper range piano, of him talking about, I wrote down all the details of how my house fell apart, how the person I got loved got killed by a bad disease out of nowhere for no reason, me living in the blast zone with our daughter, and etc. Like this rambling hypergraphic style, that reveals that his instinct in the aftermath was to try to capture every single feeling of it, to try to write down every detail of what was happening in order to kind of make sense of it, perhaps, in order to make meaning from it, to have something that emerges from it that could in some way um, make good for all of the suffering that he experienced. And he can tell that this is kind of done in vain, that it's never really going to work. As he trails off with and etc., like he can't even begin to summarize all of the things that he was trying to encapsulate. Um, and then we transition. I made these songs, and this is referring to the A Crow Looked at Me album, I would assume, um, from this experience. And the next thing I knew, I was standing in the dirt under the desert sky at night outside Phoenix at a music festival that had paid to fly me in to play these death songs to a bunch of young people on drugs. And it's like the unreality of that experience, and how quickly that must have rushed up after it. Let's check the explanation, because I'm sure it'll talk about what festival it says. The Arco Santani Festival. So this was May 12th to 14th in 2017. And then, is that how you spell his name? Yeah. So his wife passed away like about a year before, like a little less than a year before. So can you imagine that? To go from being in the hospital room watching your wife die, and feeling like your life is dying, to less than a year from then, performing an album of songs you had written about that experience to a bunch of young people on drugs. um, and like and then the rest of the song builds from this moment. And I think really trying to understand kind of the timeline of that moment, the feeling of suddenness to it, is really key to trying to get into his shoes here. Standing in the dust next to an idling bus, Skrillex aside, the sound of subwoofers in the distance. I love that he mentions Skrillex. That he's bumming around after he's played his set, and he's next to this bus, and Skrillex is in the bus. Just the surreality of it. Also, I quite like, because he mentions Skrillex here, that means he's one step removed from like Kingdom Hearts 3, which has Skrillex on the soundtrack, if you allow this somewhat strenuous connection. And then going in the opposite direction, he collaborated with an artist called Little Wings on the album called Mount Eerie from 2003. And Little Wings collaborated with Raiko Kudo and Tori Kudo and their band Maher Shalal Hajbaz on an album called, I don't remember, but they did collaborate. So now we have a path of connection between Reiko Kudo and Kingdom Hearts 3 that involves Skrillex. So that's quite wonderful. And again, another example of just how surreal real life can be, how just a collection of circumstances can lead you to thinking about your dead wife while standing outside Skrillex's tour bus. I love this too. I stayed up to 3 talking about Wise Blood and Father John Misty, about songwritings and the backstage bungalows. This feels very, very much like a Sun Kill Moon lyric or a Nelsgaard lyric in that it had, well, Nelsgaard doesn't write songs, but a Nelsgaard line from one of his books, in that it has this sort of like casual name dropping that isn't really meant to emphasize any sort of point. It's more just like for completeness, that he really is trying to diary here and kind of catalog his life. So of course he would mention specifically who it was with in order to kind of revive that experience more vividly with him later. And yet it again reflects, just like the Skrillex next to the idling bus, because they are celebrities and because this is name dropping, you get another layer of meaning as the listener, and that you can much more tangibly imagine what this conversation would be, what it would sound like, what kind of mood he would be in the aftermath of it, if you listen to these artists and if you're kind of familiar with who they might be as people. It's really interesting to me. I don't know. It's kind of enchanting, this idea, you know, them eating fruit and jumping on the bed like lost children, exploding across the earth, and self-indulgent, all-consuming wreck of ideas that blot out the stars. To be still alive felt so absurd. I mean, that really says it all right there, right? That in the aftermath of his wife's passing, that when he felt so devastated, when it felt like his house fell apart, that he was living in the blast zone of this thing, and then here he is exploding across the earth, collaborating, well, not collaborating, but hanging out and talking with these other critically acclaimed artists, being next to Skrillex's bus. The absurdity of it. More than the tragedy, more than the joy of it, there's just an absurdity of it that just overwhelms him. And then, almost in an absurdist move, he leaps right back from here. There's no kind of hook into it where he goes, but, and it's like clearly him going, my devastation is unique, and then he goes, but, you know, realistically, I know that people do just get cancer and die. It's a thing that happens. Here, there's like no connection at all. He's just kind of reminded, I think. I think the connection is that the fact that he's still alive is so absurd, given that so many people get cancer and die, so many people get hit by trucks and die. People just have their lives erased for no reason. Everyone else just averts their eyes. That he's, I guess, averting his eyes here, that he's having these experiences. He's out playing songs to young people on drugs that aren't perhaps really processing it, aren't really contemplating the real death. I kind of think is the implication of this, given that it's like a festival that also has Skrillex, and the fact that he emphasizes paid to fly me in. Maybe I'm being a little cynical here, but it seems sort of like this is more on the theme of averting our eyes. And then again, at the end, as he kind of delivers this final thesis, we have this devastating boom chord again. that really harkens back to his more early music, which was a lot more noisy and abrasive. And then this is where the song really becomes something special to me. Um, Up until now, I really enjoyed this song for sure, and I thought it was quite interesting that he had this almost ironic, jaunty chorus that keeps intruding in this extremely interesting rumination and wonderful description of incidents in his life. I thought that was very novel. Um, but here, this last verse. Um, well, then I was leaning on Skrillex's tuner bus, waiting for the hotel shuttle in the middle of the night. I barely knew who I was. I looked up and saw Orion wielding a club and shield, and there you were again, majestic dead wife. And then um, there's like kind of a strumming rhythm that's been happening in the verses that again contrasts very extremely with the choruses. And again, this feels like a very Sun Kill Moon thing. I think this is something he picked up from Sun Kill Moon's album Universal Themes, which is one of my favorite Sun Kill Moon albums, maybe my favorite, where it's really kind of based around simple acoustic guitar strumming that you kind of tell like a long wandering story over that, and then you have little mix-ups and transitions in that sound that signify revelations and changes in the story, excuse me. So I think that's used to really good effect here. And at this point, after he sees Orion, um, oh, interesting. Interesting, interesting. Hmm. The strumming part really breaks down, and there's these kind of like icy crystalline piano moments that start intruding in it. Um, and it really feels like you are having the emotional experience hearing it that he did when he was looking up in the middle of the night and saw Orion, and just the sort of rhythm that he had had up until this point just starts breaking down. As my grief becomes calcified, frozen in stories, and in these songs I keep singing. And again, this happened later in the night after he went out on stage and sang all of these songs about his wife, numbing it down. The unsingable real memories of you. This really interests me. The idea that even after all of this compulsive diarying and cataloging and studying people that do this sort of self-biographizing autobiography. There's a word for that. It's not autobiographical writing, and people who do kind of like a continuous reflection of their life in their writing. That there is still something beyond. There is still the unsingable, real memories of you, that there's something so much more in essence, so much more intangible that can never ever be put into words, and that accompanies the feral eruptions of sobbing. A feral eruption. What a word choice. So animalistic again, so beyond language, so inexpressible and beyond what it is, which is just an eruption, a never-ending eruption of sobbing. Um, so we have this image. Maybe you looked at it when I scrolled down earlier. But the transition between this line and the next line is definitely my favorite moment in music from last year. We see the reintroduction of the strumming guitar, and for the first time he melodically matches the sound of the guitar instead of singing something that's sort of melodically disjoint. These waves hit less frequently. Oh, I genuinely have chills right now. Just thinking about what it is to say that as a statement. that that after all of this, that after all, like, clearly how precious it is that he has these real memories, how important they must be to affect him in this way. And then at the end to admit, in sort of the same way that way back here, he sets the tone by saying, no one can understand, my devastation is unique. That sort of honesty about one's self-importance. And then here is the other side of that. Here is what you, if you have the courage to be confessional about this sort of thinking, then you also should have the courage to admit situations of less self-mythologizing, less egoistic thinking. Basically here saying, oh my God, they hit less frequently. It's less often. That's all he's saying. Not that it's less intense, not that it doesn't happen, but just less frequently he's noticed. He'll be overcome with this emotion and hit with the feral eruption of sobbing. They thin, and then they are gone. You are gone, and then your echo is gone, and then the crying is gone. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Like, it's just so difficult to even conceptualize what this sort of moment is when you realize, you know, it's less frequent now. Someday it's gonna maybe stop. Less frequent, less intense. You are gone, and then your echo is gone, and then the crying is gone. And this line hits very tragic to me. What is left but this merchandise? This is probably going to talk about. Oh man, this is actually pretty. Oh, okay, all right. um, hmm. Once the feeling they portray is not actually around, what are the pieces of merchandise? I was too proud of it to do that, honestly. Felt like it was good. Yeah. So, anyways, it's difficult. Those were interesting quotes, but they didn't provide a definitive answer on how we should feel about this whole situation. But that's not even it. There's one little more outro verse that I just absolutely love. This is what my life feels like now. Like I got abruptly dropped off on the side of the road in the middle of a long, horrible ride in a hot van that was too full of confident, chattering dudes. Now this, I think, is obliquely connected with this story. So up until this point, we've got a fairly clear mental image of everything that's happened. He goes out, he plays the music festival, he hangs out with Father John Misty and Wise Blood. They're bumming around Skrillex's tour bus. He wants to go back to the hotel and just go to bed. He's probably getting pretty tired. And then after he sees Orion, after he's suddenly hit on this visceral level with memories of his wife, all of the setting just completely dissolves. We don't hear anything more about it until this is what my life feels like. Like I got abruptly dropped off by the side of the road. So I think what happened is that the hotel shuttle comes, he gets on, it's full of other artists and guys and whatever, and they're all going back to the hotel. And it's like abrupt because he's just gone mentally. He's just way right back thinking about his wife, thinking about all these things, thinking about how these waves hit less frequently, this extremely complex but very real emotion that everyone is probably going to experience sometime in their life, where something devastating happens and it completely occupies them, and they feel that low piano noise, and then slowly but surely the waves come less frequently. That the devastation of it becomes more and more spaced out, gradually smaller and smaller. And totally occupied by that thought, he just gets off of the shuttle, and the sound of tires are receding, taking in the night air. I say now only. There's no explanation here. There's nothing we can click to see a bunch of quotes about why he says now only. The fact that he says it out loud, too. The fact that he named the album that, he named the song that, these two simple words at the end of the title track. What does it mean? What does it mean for him to say now only here? I don't know. I've thought about it a lot. What I've found is that there are a few circumstances where, I'll tell you a little story here. I'll tell you an example of it. So last night, I'd already had a pretty exciting night, or an exciting evening, I suppose. A lot of good things had happened. Blah, 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 blah. I was heading to meet up with some friends of mine at a bar, and I was transferring between two buses, and I got off the bus, and my phone was just dead. It was weird. It had been at like 40% before. This has actually happened to me once before. I think it's the cold weather that does it. And when it happened before, I was like, oh, I just gotta take a portable charger like everywhere I go now. But I didn't because I'm an idiot. And so it was just dead. I had no idea where the bar was. I had no idea how I was gonna get there. I thought, oh man, maybe I'll just go home, but it just felt dumb. Like, come on, like, am I really just gonna go home? I'm gonna let this stop me? So I was like wandering around looking for affordable charger. And tried a few stores. It's like, man, I wish I could just somehow look up where the store was. I eventually found one, and then in another store I found the right cable, but then it turns out it wasn't sold, already charged, so it just did nothing. But when I plugged my phone into it, I was able to turn it on again for a little bit. Somehow it had gone back up to like 3%. During that time, I was able to look at the map and figure out where to go. It's like, all right, okay. It was quite a long walk. The weather was indeed pretty bad. Um, and I was like, I was thinking, like I don't drive. I don't like driving. And moreover, I feel like I'm kind of principled against it. That I don't like the idea that society forces you to drive. So, kind of in order to feel like I'm living based on my principles, I refuse to drive. I'm going to live a carless life. And I was walking in this snow and in the wind and the cold, thinking about, man, if I had a car, I could just easily go back to my house and pick up a cell phone charger. I was like, wait, no, no, no. If I had a car, I would have the cell phone charger in the car. It's like, no, no. If I had a car, I would just already be at the bar. Like, none of this would be a problem at all. But, I don't. I was thinking about that, and I was walking down this suburban street. I really had no idea where I was. I was just gunning in a direction based on what I remembered of the map. And it was really pretty. It was like really beautiful to watch the snow fall in the suburban street from the street lights and stuff. Me in this part of the city that I'd never been in before, going to a bar I'd never been into before. See some friends, and I felt like saying, now only. It came to mind. I was listening to the Go Team, which is a very, very, very different band. But it felt like a moment in which I could say, now only. That there's these just sort of moments in your life where it's almost like a bit of a depersonalization or a dissociation, where you think of all of the absurd circumstances that have piled upon themselves to get you where you are. How many of them are random? How many of them are from your deep-seated principles and are the real expressions of who you are? How many of them involve other people and their true, honest, authentic selves and what they mean to you and how they operate in the world? Just this insanely, unmeasurably, unfathomably complex jumble of circumstances and actors and feelings and actions. And you think all of that has just led me to this moment here, this now. What I am experiencing right now with all of my senses. It's like, yeah, now only. I don't know. It's a really good song. I don't know how he did it, man. This especially. This is like, I don't know. I don't know how. All right. Okay. Well, that's that's song of the day for today. Tomorrow we'll do something more fun. Okay. Bye.